I met Christopher on one of those nights when I was actually feeling good about my life decisions. I'd just ended things with this guy I'd been seeing casually for a few months. Nothing serious. Just someone to text when I was bored. And I was ready for something better. The bar was packed, but Christopher stood out immediately. He ordered whiskey neat, which already put him miles ahead of the craft beer guys I usually attracted. When he complimented my nails, I knew he was actually paying attention instead of just running through some generic pickup routine. "Those are gorgeous," he said, nodding toward my hands. "That color looks incredible on you. Most guys don't even notice when I get my nails done, let alone comment on the specific shade. I'd chosen this deep burgundy color specifically because it looked expensive and sophisticated, and here was someone who actually appreciated the effort. Christopher was tall, easily 6'2", and dressed like he had his life together. Clean button down, nice watch, confident but not arrogant. When he offered to buy me a drink, I didn't even hesitate. We talked for hours that night. He worked from home doing some kind of consulting thing that sounded both impressive and flexible. He had his own place, a car, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, rather than just trying to get me home. When he offered to call me an Uber instead of suggesting I come back to his place, I was honestly a little surprised. Most guys would have been pushing for more by then. But Christopher seemed content to just exchange numbers and make plans for an actual date. The first few weeks with Christopher were exactly what I'd been missing. He'd send flowers to my work just because it was Tuesday. He'd Uber me lunch when I mentioned being hungry during a busy day. He remembered things I told him, little details about my job, my friends, things I liked. It felt like dating someone who had actually read the manual on how to treat women properly. I started spending more time at his place because, honestly, it was nicer than mine. Christopher had good taste and seemed to actually care about his living space. Everything was clean and organized. He had quality furniture, and he cooked these elaborate meals like he was trying to impress a food critic. I'd handle the cleanup afterward, which seemed like a fair trade for not having to plan or prepare anything myself. The thing about Christopher was that he was almost too perfect in some ways. He'd get genuinely excited when I came over, like a puppy who hadn't seen his owner all day. It was sweet, but also kind of intense for how new everything still was. We hadn't had any conversations about being exclusive or where things were heading. We were just enjoying each other's company and seeing how things developed naturally. That's why when Rico started texting me again, I didn't see it as this massive betrayal or anything. Rico and I had history, the kind of undeniable chemistry that doesn't just disappear because you're dating someone new. He kept saying he missed what we had, that he'd made a mistake letting me go, all the things you want to hear from someone who used to matter to you. Christopher and I were still in that early phase where we were getting to know each other. But Rico and I had this deep connection that went back years. When Rico suggested meeting up to talk, I knew it wasn't really about talking, but I also knew that if I didn't handle this situation now, it would just keep hanging over my head. Christopher and I hadn't defined what we were yet, and I needed to close this chapter with Rico properly before I could fully commit to whatever Christopher and I might become. The hotel room felt familiar in a way that Christopher's perfect apartment didn't. Rico knew exactly how to touch me, exactly what I needed, because we had years of history together. This wasn't about hurting Christopher or being malicious. This was about getting the closure I needed to move forward. Afterward, when Rico said he'd miss this, I told him I would too, because it was true, but I also knew it was really over now. I blocked Rico's number as soon as I got home. Whatever we'd had was officially in the past, and I could focus completely on Christopher now. What he didn't know wouldn't hurt him, and there was no point in creating drama over something that was never going to happen again. I'd gotten my closure. Rico understood it was final, and Christopher and I could continue building whatever we were building without any complications. Christopher never suspected anything, which confirmed that I'd made the right choice in handling things privately. He continued being his sweet, attentive self, and I was able to be fully present with him now that the Rico situation was completely resolved. When we finally had the conversation about being exclusive a few weeks later, I could commit to it completely because I'd already taken care of my loose ends. Being official with Christopher felt like leveling up in every way. He introduced me to his friends, started including me in his weekend plans, and treated me like I was actually important to him, rather than just someone he was casually seeing. I'd never been with someone who was so consistent and reliable. He did what he said he was going to do, showed up when he said he would, and seemed genuinely invested in making me happy. By month 3, I was staying at his place more often than my own. It just made sense. His apartment was bigger. The neighborhood was better, and he seemed to enjoy having me around. We fell into these comfortable routines where he'd handle the cooking and I'd take care of cleaning up. He worked from home, so he was usually there when I got back from work, already planning what we'd have for dinner or what we'd do that evening. The transition to living together happened almost by accident. We'd been together about 6 months when Christopher started getting particular about how I organized things in his space. He'd rearrange the pillows after I'd been sitting on the couch, or mention that I'd left a coffee mug in the sink instead of loading it directly into the dishwasher. It wasn't mean or anything, but it was starting to feel a little controlling. If you're going to be this picky about every little thing, I told him during one of these conversations, I might as well just move in and split everything 50-50. Then it's our space, instead of me being a guest who can't do anything right. All right, bet, Christopher said. Let's do it. I honestly hadn't expected him to agree so quickly, but I wasn't going to back down from something that was clearly going to benefit both of us. Living together would save me money on rent, and Christopher would have someone to share expenses with instead of carrying everything himself. The first year of living together was probably the best relationship experience I'd ever had. Christopher was considerate and thoughtful, always checking if I needed anything when he was running errands, making sure there was food I liked in the house, giving me space when I needed it, but also being available when I wanted company. He was exactly the kind of partner I'd always hoped I'd find. Stable, generous, and genuinely caring. I started to feel like I'd finally figured out how to do relationships correctly. Christopher and I rarely fought. We had similar ideas about how to spend our time, and we'd built this comfortable life together that felt sustainable and mature. My friends were jealous of how well Christopher treated me, and I enjoyed being able to talk about my relationship without having to make excuses or explain away red flags like I'd had to do in the past. But sometime in the last few months, Christopher started changing. He became distant and moody for no apparent reason. He'd still cook dinner and handle his responsibilities around the apartment, but the warmth and enthusiasm he used to show me started disappearing. Conversations became shorter. He stopped planning special dates, and he seemed generally less interested in spending quality time together. I started wondering if he was getting bored with me, or if maybe he was looking for an excuse to end things but didn't know how to bring it up. Men can be so passive-aggressive about relationship issues instead of just communicating directly about what's bothering them. I tried asking him if everything was okay, but he'd just say he was tired from work or stressed about some project. The morning everything fell apart started like any other morning. Christopher was working from home. I was getting ready for work. And we were moving around each other in that familiar dance of people who'd been sharing space for almost a year. I was running late and couldn't find my phone. So I asked Christopher if he'd seen it. "What is this?" I asked when I walked into the living room and saw him holding my phone with this strange expression on his face. "You tell me," he said, turning the screen toward me. My stomach dropped when I saw the message thread with Rico from over a year ago. Somehow, Christopher had gotten into my phone and scrolled back through months and months of old conversations until he found something he could be upset about. The message he was showing me was from right after that hotel encounter, when Rico had said he'd miss what we had, and I'd agreed. "You're seriously going through my private messages from over a year ago?" I asked. "That's a pretty major violation of privacy, don't you think?" But Christopher wasn't interested in discussing his snooping behavior. He was focused entirely on the Rico situation, acting like he'd discovered some massive betrayal instead of finding evidence of something that happened before we were even officially together. "This was before we were exclusive," I explained. "Before we were living together. You're seriously ending everything over something I did before I was technically your roommate." The look on Christopher's face was like I'd physically slapped him. He called me disgusting, said I disrespected his home, and told me I was lucky he didn't throw my stuff in the street. The whole reaction was so over the top and dramatic that I couldn't believe this was the same person who'd been sharing a bed with me for the past year. "Get out and never come back," he said, and I could tell from his tone that he wasn't interested in having a rational conversation about this. Christopher started pulling my belongings out of closets and drawers, shoving everything into trash bags like he couldn't get me out of there fast enough. My laptop, my air fryer, clothes, even important documents like my birth certificate and passport. Everything went into those bags, while he told me how disappointed and disgusted he was. The whole thing felt surreal. One minute we were living this comfortable domestic life together, and the next minute I was standing on the sidewalk with garbage bags full of my possessions, because Christopher couldn't handle the reality that I'd had experiences before I met him. His reaction was so extreme and final that it actually revealed how emotionally fragile he really was underneath all that calm, stable exterior. I spent that first night in a park because I literally had nowhere else to go. My friends were either unavailable or didn't want to get involved in relationship drama. My sister told me I'd made my bed when I called asking if I could stay with her for a few days. My mother lives in another state and is struggling financially, so that wasn't an option either. Sitting on that park bench with everything I owned, stuffed into trash bags, I realized how typical this whole situation was. Men talk a big game about being mature and rational, but the moment their ego gets bruised, they become completely unreasonable. Christopher's reaction proved that he was just as soft and ego-driven as every other guy I'd ever dated. He couldn't handle one little mistake from over a year ago, something that wasn't even malicious or meant to hurt him. The next day, I met Malik at a coffee shop where I was trying to figure out my next move. He's 43, divorced, works nights, and drives this black Infiniti that suggested he had his life together financially. When he overheard me on the phone trying to find somewhere to stay, he offered to let me crash on his couch until I could get back on my feet. Malik's couch isn't exactly comfortable, but it's better than sleeping outside. And he's been decent about giving me space to figure things out. I've submitted over 50 job applications in the past few weeks, but the market is terrible right now and I'm not getting any responses. Christopher still has most of my important documents and belongings, which makes everything more complicated. I've been researching legal options because what Christopher did was essentially an illegal eviction. You can't just throw someone out with no notice when they've been living somewhere for almost a year, even if both names aren't on the lease. I'm looking into legal aid services, though most of them have waiting lists that stretch for months. The most frustrating part is how Christopher has painted himself as the victim in this situation, when he's the one who violated my privacy and then destroyed our entire life together over something that happened before we were even serious. He's probably telling everyone that I cheated on him, completely leaving out the context and timeline that makes his reaction completely unreasonable. I've been watching relationship advice videos online, and every expert says the same thing. Healthy couples can work through challenges like this if both people are committed to the relationship. The fact that Christopher immediately went nuclear instead of trying to have an adult conversation about it just proves that he was looking for an excuse to end things anyway. What bothers me most is how he made me feel like I was crazy for expecting basic respect and consideration. I never set out to hurt anyone, and the Rico situation was about getting closure so I could fully commit to Christopher. If anything, I was being responsible by handling my past before it could interfere with our future. Now I'm starting over completely, because Christopher couldn't handle the fact that I'm a real person with a history, instead of some perfect fantasy woman who existed in a vacuum before meeting him. His loss, honestly, I gave him the best year of my life, and he threw it all away over his own insecurity and fragile masculinity. I'll get back on my feet eventually, with or without his help, and when I do, maybe he'll realize what he gave up. But by then, it'll be too late for him to undo the damage he's caused with his dramatic overreaction to something that had nothing to do with him in the first place.